Imagine with me for a moment. You just got a promotion at your job. Or maybe your parents give to you a credit card for your birthday. Or you won the lottery. However the case, you deposited that amount in your bank account. So you go out to celebrate with some friends or maybe alone to drink. The night is young and you head back home, listening to some music on your way back. But something happens. Maybe you've driven drunk, drove off a steep part of the road, got road rage, hit from behind. However you envision it, something bad happens as you total your car and you along with it, laying there, bleeding, until the world goes dark. And right as you close your eyes, you open them, looking around to find yourself woken up, not on a hospital bed or some shady building, but in front of your house, not a single wound on your body. And right as you're about to think about what happens, right as you're questioning anything that could possibly explain the circumstance,
when I was younger, I'd usually think that the term open world games was something that hadn't made all that crazy amount of sense, especially considering the more nuanced ideas that came with the fact that a world could essentially go on for what feels like an eternity. I mean, if the worlds themselves are procedurally generated, then it would make some amount of sense for there to be a possible way to make it loop around on itself to the nth degree. Though even games like Minecraft, with its 1.5 billion mile distance to get to the world border, around 30 to 80 days in real time with estimates online, or No Man's Sky with its virtually endless time taken to explore over 250 galaxies within the game to reach the origin of the universe's first stars. All journeys that resonated with what makes the trek in these games worthwhile. The journey itself, coupled with survival elements within their entire structure, gives the player something to do throughout the trip. What with Minecraft's aspects of hunger, insomnia, and the onslaught of creatures to fight once a night hits the player, or No Man's Sky's own consistency in scanning new creatures, terraforming terrain, and consistently surviving titanic planets, with the consistency of slightly faster travel than that of Aero Engineer workshops. Still, despite this, there is some characteristic that gives it meaning to its entire monumental area of exploration. Though there is one thing, of many, it's still a fictional world, that it lacks, and that is the real consequence of failure within the world. In Minecraft, you could always just respawn, or, in other circumstances, keep your inventory on for the experience and lack of failing results, or, alternatively, using items like the Totem of Undying to keep yourself alive for just a bit longer. In No Man's Sky, the player simply loses all their resources and can always go back to their place of death to retrieve them, spawning fairly close by, and even if you're in an entirely different planetary system, a quick portal is always the solution to get back to where you were. But what if there was a game that combined both qualities in a more intriguing fashion? In Grand Theft Auto 5, a game I feel needs no introduction, death is something more of a financial nuisance than anything that one could find to be all that more life-threatening. Losing any amount of money in your bank account can feel like a nightmare, but unlike real-world circumstances, you could just rob another convenience store, accept another heist, sell stocks, whatever it is that you need to get back on top. In GTA 5 Online's mode, dying does indeed have financial repercussions. You could always lose $500 when you bite the dust, but cash takes priority. If you have no cash at hand, you won't drop money for other players or yourself to pick up, but you can still lose money from your bank. You drop 10% of your cash when you die, capped at a maximum of $500. That money, post-campaign, increases all the way to $5,000 for every death with hospital visits. And here's where the question lies. How much do you think your life is worth? I'm not talking about the physical cost of your organs or skills, or how much bathwater you could sell. No, it's more metaphorical than that. I'm also not mentioning the concept of immortality, to pay some price to live forever. How much are you willing to spend on coming back to life once again? $100, maybe $1,000, what about $5,000? There isn't a solid choice, of course, but the price is already set for you ahead of time to be chosen at any moment in time. Now, there are a variety of circumstances that could play a role into that question or decision, or maybe you've already answered it for yourself. But the context behind any decision at all is something that is fundamentally important in deciding what exactly could occur within a person's life to make a choice like that. Age, financial stability, or even the most mundane circumstances in our lives could be a trait or a statement that could make the decision far more difficult to really make at the end of the day. And maybe in addition to your promotion, your significant other had left you, or perhaps your rent is due in a couple of days and you've already paid a fee for an eviction notice. Whatever the case is, negative events often come into play when making this entire decision process as well. Loss aversion, a key concept in behavioral economics developed primarily by psychologists Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky, is part of their prospect theory, which refers to the idea that people experience losses more intensely than they experience gains of that same magnitude. In other words, losing $100 feels worse than gaining $100 feels good. Kahneman and Tversky found that psychologically the negative emotional impact of a loss is about twice as powerful as the positive international and emotional impact of an equivalent gain. This means that individuals are more likely to make decisions that avoid losses than decisions that seek equivalence or even greater gain. In this hypothetical scenario of dying and losing money, let's keep it at a steady $5,000 in reference to the game. Instead of traditional consequence like permanent death, loss aversion would play a significant role in how the person processes the event. The fear and anxiety of losing money, even in exchange for being revived, might outweigh the relief or rational satisfaction of being alive again. Psychologically, the individual might focus more on the financial loss rather than the incredible gain of avoiding death, as losses are felt more deeply than gains, as we said about prospect theory before. This could then lead to a range of behavioral responses, typically two that makes the most sense, where they, the people, may become highly protective of their finances even at the cost of avoiding other risks, or two, they might engage in riskier behavior as the certainty of losing the money after each death might push them to take even larger risks, knowing that the penalty is predictable and capped. In World of Warcraft, when a player dies, they incur a durability loss of their equipped gear. This durability loss translates into a monetary repair cost which the player must pay to fix the gear when they arrive. Similar to insurance costs in real life, where our objects or anything that we hold dear essentially costs extra to repair, and there is a certain price to it at the end of the day. The cost scales with the quality of the player's gear, meaning that a higher level player or players with expensive equipment face higher repair costs, creating a subtle financial consequence for dying frequently. This extenuates it into a real-life circumstance with economic classes that we have within our society and the insurance that is easily or not so easily paid by a person or a family specifically. In Terraria, the monetary penalty depends on the difficulty level. On normal difficulty, players lose 50% of their coins upon death, which can be recovered if they make it back to the point where they died. However, if a player dies again before receiving their coins and recovering them, they can lose them permanently. In Fear and Hunger, resources are incredibly scarce, making survival a constant challenge, and if the player does die, they not only lose their progress, but also whatever items, healing supplies, or other resources they've painstakingly gathered. The loss of these critical resources can be thought of as a form of in-game currency, given how essential they are to staying alive, but even before death, the player can suffer crippling injuries such as losing a limb, which can severely limit gameplay. These injuries have long-term consequences that can feel akin to a monetary penalty, as it makes survival harder and restricts access to crucial gameplay mechanics such as combat options. And in real life, losing a limb is in some way, shape, or form a financial and economic risk, because afterwards there is the need to buy specific resources to function within life, such as prosthetics, and sometimes that might not even be enough to fully function back into society. And so these monetary values hold these specific characteristics as to how exactly we use them whenever we suffer penalties in our real world life, similar to video games themselves. What if there was no cap to your injuries though? Hospital bills typically aren't, so what reason is there for them to be in this example either? Life-threatening injuries, such as multiple traumas, spinal cord injuries, and organ damage, are typically in high amounts, with ER visits and trauma teams being from $5,000 all the way up to $20,000 plus, or surgeries equating to a high average of $500,000. not to mention hospital stays, rehabilitation, medicals, and ongoing treatment, as well as total estimates going from anywhere to $50,000 to $1 million plus. Many medical treatments alone carry such financial risk, so why shouldn't this example as well? In the US alone, there are a variety of resources that go into the care from a person's own situation and circumstance, but none of that is necessary for this example, at least not the actual aspect of time spent within the location proper, only the financial drainage of your own bank. To be close to dying after being billed afterwards is already annoying enough, but mark that up with having died and being brought back, not through any external medical practice, but by your own money from your bank account. That alone is enough to make us think twice about the injuries themselves. Operant conditioning, a theory developed by B.F. Skinner, suggests that behaviors are shaped by the consequences that follow them. In this case, the consequence of injury or death is the financial loss from one's own bank account, a form of negative punishment wherein something desirable is taken away to reduce a behavior. The monetary penalty for dying would likely serve as a deterrent for engaging in risky behaviors. Over time, individuals will learn to avoid situations that could result in death and financial penalty because they associate those actions with a negative outcome. On the other spectrum, moral hazard occurs when people take on more risks because they do not bear the full cost of their actions. In this scenario, the fact that one can be revived by simply paying a financial price could reduce the perceived gravity of death or injury, thus encouraging riskier behavior. If individuals know that they can avoid the full consequences of death, i.e. not remaining dead, they might become more reckless, believing they could always be revived as long as they have the money. This creates a psychological disconnect between the gravity of death and the real-world consequences, fostering riskier behavior. Even beyond an individual level, how would this idea affect society's own perception? In the fantasy and romance webtoon series The Mage and the Demon Queen...
Ooh, did I hear someone say webtoon?
Morlo?
Let me take over this section, please.
I don't know.
You owe that much to us.
Fine. Go ahead.
Yay! In the fantasy and romance webtoon series The Mage and the Demon Queen, adventurers who climb the tower to defeat Queen Velverosa often case die on their way up to her final floor, and when they do, it is up to the Fulcina Church to help them out. The system of resurrection through the kingdom's mana tree removes the traditional fear of death for humans, allowing them to engage in war without consequence. When an adventurer dies in the Demon Tower, their body appears at the local temple, where they can be revived if they have enough money. If not, they are tossed out.
Thank you, Morlo. I'll take it from here. Like in our example, this introduces a monetary penalty for survival, paralleling real-life concerns about the costs associated with injury and death, such as hospital bills. In other fictional settings and in real life, the fear of death often serves as a deterrent to war and a motivator for peace. However, the resurrection system in this world eliminates that fear for humans, giving them no risk in combat. This creates an imbalance, as you would expect, as they continually fight and die without consequence, making it easier for them to engage in war without hesitation. This brings us back to the aspect of moral hazards themselves, within the consequence of our own actions as human beings, that everything around us has this cost given to it, that things given financial value could just simply attach a more pressing matter to the entirety of our own societal structure. If you could pay whatever value you've designated for your life, the highest amount that you could find to be reasonable to give yourself what is essentially immortality, then what would that say about the way that you perceive your life standing in addition to the life of all those that surround you? Your friends, your family, your partner. What gratification from your life gives it any reason to be rearranged back in your favor, so long as you have no respect for it, or rather that you have too much of a respect for it at the same time? What if the people that we hate the most in the world, the Trumps, the Musks, the Bezos, serial killers, sociopaths, people in death row, given the chance, would be incapable of being worried about death threats, assassination attempts, any fatal accident that could potentially end their life for good? If simply coming back meant a slap on the wrist, a small bail paid off fully? What if their everyday life of paying taxes or paying for their actions meant nothing for the entirety of the world? we hold true within the aspect of how we interpret our own standard when it comes to the process of physical currency. A value that seems easier to imagine, that these pieces of paper and metal discs, metal coins that hold true value. But that process has existed for so long that it's become something of an understandable idea. That trading paper makes sense, that copper and silver and iron to some extent have value within it. That gold, this gleaming yellow metal, just from appearance alone, would posit some extent of beauty to it, thus more value. This does make sense in the physical style of the way we interpret the value of these things. In a 2023 article, Adam Garcia, CEO of the Stork Doc, had stated in reference to the financial advice provided by the Founding Fathers that financial independence enables individuals to have personal liberty and self-governance. It grants them the freedom to make choices based on their values, goals, and aspirations, fostering a sense of self-reliance and self-determination. Still, what of those aspirations, that self-determination, what if it all becomes as part of our own adherence to the prospect theory itself? What if, given the chance, we become worse versions of ourselves through the very greed that we consistently attempt to suppress in simply financial circumstances? What if, in this instance, it becomes something more than greed? It becomes reckless, apathy for consequence, a complete and utter aversion to the safety of ourselves and others. Giving value to physical money is one thing, something tangible and understandable, that whatever material our coins are made out of, that there is some physical aspect of losing any amount and it being a harder thing to accept in the long run, because we can see that there is less of it within our wallets, within our person, that the weight of all that currency, in quite a literal sense, decreased to a noticeable degree that it becomes inevitable that it's going to be understood, whether in a subtle or obvious manner. And maybe that's the case. Maybe now you've changed your answer to a lower amount. $100, $500, any amount that could physically be taken away from you in the value of cash. However, on the other hand, we live in a modernized world. So physical money isn't a process counting the coins on ourselves or handing people green or multicolored bills with various degrees of values, because those values themselves were never the way that we counted. Credit, debit, Bitcoin, whatever you call it, at its finest value, its resolve, is the manner of which we run the world. To give money some value is enough if it's physically had, but with credit cards, this numerical value, that's just all it is, numbers. If it's seen as so unusual to give value to items before currency, subjective values, to be giving value to metal-shaped circles and pieces of paper, to simply be given value to unseen numbers until we connect to our bank accounts, then it becomes an easier way to assign costs to ourselves in some manner of time. Math, numbers, quantitative data, it's all a conceptual way we've designed the world to be seen, to be interacted with. And yet, despite this, there is still this underlying fear that if that number, the specific arrangement of numbers, all lined up to fulfill a value, an economic value, in our lives, ones that people can choose to listen to or not, that can make a person more attractive, just with a couple zeros added to that initial set. If that number goes down, goes lower, that maybe, just maybe, we won't have any more to look at next time we check. It's Schrodinger's cat, only given more probable outcomes, that the groceries you buy that day, the gas you got today, the bills you paid last week, the money you spent on the bar, those $5,000 you lost from dying, that all of that could be thrown away as nothing more than just another number that is integral to our own identity, whether or not we like it. So the question comes back to that entire beginning of this entire video. How much do you think your life is worth? The answer, of course, is extremely subjective, given the circumstantial nature that is the human experience, but many qualities and effects come from a situation like the premise of death within games like GTA 5. Money, our own, at the end of the day, is nothing short of a numerical value that is placed within what we perceive as special, because it helps with societal structure, helps keep every single part of who we are in place, and any number, no matter the amount of causes that slightly hint at hesitation to allow that final transaction to fall through. Death, at its core, is already a financial responsibility. And that finality is what allows us to make a broader choice at not being as selfish towards those around us, even towards ourselves, through the aspect of self-harm. This gratification of human life is essentially what is creating these values within our own society, within our own entire perception of how we live and how we interact with others and ourselves through our day-to-day events. More gratification will tend to increase the value that you're willing to spend to come back from dying, as there is something worth coming back to, versus the secondary case, of which we will talk about in our secondary video, more so depends on the situations within our life that gives us a less than desirable outcome to return back to at the end of the day. That decision to use or not use the money, to be given that second chance, that hesitation, it all provides the already predisposed evidence that we, at the end of the day, are still human in our nature. So keep that choice. Keep that hesitation. It's what makes you strong, what makes all of us strong. And then at the very end of every single encounter with that cost, those last couple $1,000s, do we really find that the cost itself, the value within that second chance, is the capability to do what people do best? Change. And isn't that the best reason of them all? And still, despite that, what about something else? What about